Hi everyone, today I'm talking to Algimantas Stancelis, who is a software developer, an Agile coach, and a good friend. Algimantas is one of the few people I know who had the courage to switch back to software development after a successful career as an Agile coach. During our conversation, we talked about Agile software development, psychological safety, and the sources of software developers' suffering and well-being. Enjoy. So, okay, Algimantas, thanks for joining the Happy Developer podcast. Finally, you're here. So it took some time to set us up. And maybe the first question, how are you doing?
Hello, Povilas. Thank you for having me here on your podcast. How I'm doing? I'm kind of chilling at the moment in last couple of weeks because I was laid off at my current job. I was working in junior sports, and they decided to get out of Lithuania and kind of close Vilnius office here. So that means that most of us were laid off, and I was among one of those laid off. And it was kind of sudden news. I didn't expect it to happen so soon. But at the same time, I got unplanned vacation, and now I have more spare time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not sure how to react. Whether do you see it as a good thing or a bad thing?
At first, it was a bad thing because it is never pleasant to be laid off or fired, and also the suddenness of that was kind of disturbing a bit. But after the initial shock, let's say it started to feel kind of, it is a good thing. Okay, one more bad thing was that kind of, in my mind, I had planned to finish a couple of projects, and now I can't do that. And okay, it pisses me a bit, like that. I really wanted to finish and see them through until the end.
And I guess that's something sometimes recruiters maybe don't understand when they engage software developers, that you're working on a product, you're in a way creating I will use that word, I'm not afraid of it, a piece of art, a functioning product, your baby, and then suddenly you have to leave it and just accept the fact that you will, in your situation, you will not be putting your hands on it like never, in a way. So I can imagine that it's a difficult feeling that it takes time to process, I guess.
It takes some time, maybe not too much, but that's actually that's true, that if you, as a recruiter, if you approach developer at a particular time in the project, you will not be successful if that project is going well, or even not so well. But if that developer wants to kind of achieve some milestones or finish the project till the end, it will be very hard to hire him somewhere else.
Exactly. So speaking of recruitment, I guess I would be interested to learn, what are your current plans for the future, short term or long term?
Okay, my current plans, the short-term plans are to have a vacation, to have a longer vacation. And actually, the news of that layoff in junior sports spread among the recruiters really fast, and we got bombarded on LinkedIn with messages.
How many of them did you get since that moment?
I didn't count.
Approximately.
But it's in attempts. I don't know,
Okay.
20, 30, or 40,
Wow.
something like that. I haven't checked this week my LinkedIn, and at first I replied to the recruiters that, okay, let's get in touch later. But last week I just didn't want even to kind of break my vacation mood. It doesn't feel as totally vacation because officially I'm still working at Junior Sports, but de facto it's a consulting period, and I'm not actively developing software anymore.
Oh, exactly. So in a way, you are not like actually working on the project, but while the onboarding process takes place in a way, because you worked on that product, your responsibility is to consult those people who are actually continuing the work, if I understand correctly.
I'm not sure how much I can tell
Oh, I
because
see. Okay, fair enough.
of the confidentiality, but let's say I cannot actively develop product
Okay.
anymore.
Okay, so short-term vacation, right?
Yeah, and longer. At the same time, short term, I'm also looking. I'm thinking about things and whether I want to change languages, technology stack, or something like that. Also on what kind of product I want to work. And I've started doing a research, and an informal one. Kind of, I talk with my friends from different companies to understand what kind of products they are working on, what kind of culture are in those companies. So I would know my options, not from the side of which recruiters have written me a message, but from the side of what's totally available and which companies and products I find attractive.
Exactly. I think that's an important strategy that maybe some engineers sometimes miss, because when you are choosing a possible opportunity from those that you receive on LinkedIn, it's still like a limited sample. And there's a much greater variety that you can choose from. And, just because you were not attracted or sourced at some particular moment doesn't mean that your dream, let's say dream company, is not recruiting actively or not. So I think it's very wise. And I had one client who as a counselor who, let's say briefly, not to disclose also too much, to maintain confidentiality, the person is not satisfied with a new position. And then I asked him, why did you decide to join that company? He said, oh, well, so I was considering changing the job. I thought that I would like to get a new challenge. But then I asked, okay, but why this particular position? Why this particular company? And he said, well, that's the one I chose from the ones that were available. And, and then he got into certain, let's say, problems that he was not aware of when he was being sourced. He was not told the full picture, what project he will be working on specifically. Another problem is when, let's say, in certain companies, you are said that you will be working on one project, but then you are assigned to another one. You expect to work with one manager, but it turns out that you will be working with another one. I mean, I'm not sure if it resembles your experience. It would be great to know. But what I'm getting is that there is that problem of expectations versus reality. And I mean, that's a sad reality. And yeah, it's a pity that developers who have a possibility to choose, have a possibility to find that dream job, in a way, they sometimes get into a place where, okay, that's not the picture I was told or imagined. And then they had that how to say, professional dignity to continue the project, maybe to complete it. And then you are in that state of mind that, okay, so that's not my dream job, but I want to complete the project so that I would feel, how's that word? Yeah, I would feel good about myself as a professional, I guess. So that's a tricky situation, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, that happens because some companies kind of have open positions for particular team, and you kind of get to know which people you are going to work with. but there are some other companies that you just are interviewed in general, and you even don't know which team you will be assigned to. And yeah, I had cases where developers were kind of, they had some friend working in a company in one team, and they heard good things from that team, and they that was what helped them make the decision to join the, but they were assigned to a totally different project, more difficult one, with some problems, and kind of they get dissatisfied. And yeah, sometimes it's it's really sad to see some good developer leaving the job because they were in some particular project or team, and you know that if that developer would have been in another team, he would probably enjoy and would bring great value to the company and the people working around. Yeah, I've seen such cases, and it was kind of sad for me because I met some great people and who left companies because just the wrong team.
Yeah, that's one of the, I guess, if we had to name things that make developers suffer or that increase unhappiness, I think that's one of those things then that you are assigned to a project that in a way you you didn't have a possibility to choose, and you just are assigned because you are assigned, and that's how business works sometimes.
To tell the truth, good or great developers, usually if they are assigned to a kind of difficult project, they usually still do
But difficult
well,
doesn't
and
mean that it's bad, you know.
yeah, it's not always some difficult and challenging projects are interesting. Yeah, really are. Maybe there's one kind of projects that I don't find many people who would like to work on, and these are usually called legacy projects, where you have a big system that is written in old school way, or kind of the architecture is terrible, and there are a lot of maintenance issues. Your majority of work is support and maintenance, and the system doesn't have automated tests or very little. So basically, if you even want to change and improve the system, it's very risky. So kind of, you could say that it's a challenging, but it's like walking in a minefield, and the casualties usually are high. So even great developers get burned, but yeah, usually they do way better job, and yeah, they do great impact. But I've seen them get tired or deciding that, okay, what I'm doing with my life, maybe I can spend half a year or a year with such a project, but I don't want to maintain such kind of project for 3 years or more.
Yeah, that's another thing. So one thing, when you get what you did not expect, and you did not have autonomy to choose or provide your own understanding whether you would like to work on this project or not. The other thing is that when you have to work on legacy, and as a recruiter also realized that the greatest thing is for one of the greatest things for developer is to work on from scratch, basically, to create something new, create new features using maybe some trendy technologies, and to see if they work, how they work, what will be the end result. It seems that this also gives some satisfaction, right?
Yeah, those are
Greenfield,
projects where kind of you start from scratch and you have green grass, and the grass is looking great. And yeah, some developers kind of only look for opportunities where you kind of can do this, and they want to try their some technology method or something. And some people even call them, these kind of developers, resume developers, who kind of look for projects that will look good on their resumes. But some of the, it depends. Some of these developers kind of very valuable for companies and they do great stuff. But kind of, I think that the technology that you want to try in a project should match what the actual business needs. And I've seen cases where, and I have been myself one of the cases where I've when the domain-driven design just started, I tried to create project in that kind of way, but it was a too small a project, and it didn't need such kind of method, and I was over engineering things. And because of that, the project took way longer. And now when I look back, it is one of kind of projects that I'm ashamed as a professional that, okay, that was not very good from my side to do it. But at the time, kind of, I knew about new technology, but I didn't knew what kind of project it is best suited for.
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem, because I'm not sure what's your take on that, because in psychology, for example, there is a lot of research done, not psychology, maybe I have to be more specific, in counseling psychology or psychotherapy. There's a lot of research done what type of techniques or methodologies are most suited for a specific case, disorder, or topic. So, for example, there is a consensus that first choice treatment for depression is cognitive behavioral therapy, let's say, that focuses on how you think about things, how you feel about things, and how these things interrelate and produce maybe certain cognitive mistakes that then increase your suffering, let's say. So when it comes to, let's say, trauma, first choice treatment now, or one of the first choice treatments, is MDR therapy, let's say, something like that. So whereas in software engineering, I think especially in professional world, there are professional case studies. Let's say Facebook did this, Google did that, Amazon did this, but I'm not sure if there is like empirical evidence what actually is the best for a certain business case. So when you, as someone who is a software engineer, but also Agile coach, I will be interested to talk about this head of yours as well. How to reconcile this problem in your view? On the one hand, developers' willingness and motivation to try something new. So that's one thing. Then the business interest to use what is the most efficient, can create the most business value, or whatever. And then finally, the pit in the middle, where is that lack of hardcore empirical evidence what actually works in certain situations. What's your take on this problem?
Okay, I don't know about hardcore empirical evidence, because that one is not easy to find in the software development field, because it is not easy to do experiments in software development, because it's kind of projects and they are unique. You cannot do the same thing in multiple ways and see which one works better. And the answer to this question also depends on who is asking, whether it is a developer asking, who want to know how to choose which technology to use, or kind of a manager is asking, so she or he would know whether developers doing good choices. But yeah, I will answer from the developer perspective, because usually developers or some kind of technical managers are choosing the technologies they are going to use for the project. So if you heard about some cool stuff that you want to try, then a good thing is to dig out about the context and in what kind of projects, what kind of organizations these things were done. Because, for example, if something was done on Facebook or Google, let's say there was some time with microservices, and microservices were a big trend. And I've seen and heard companies that started doing microservice architectures for cases where they actually didn't need to, because Facebook and Google used microservices at that time for big projects. And also, even if those projects were not big, they had a lot of users, like hundreds, thousands, or millions. And if you have tens of thousands of users, then microservices are an over-engineering. And after that came kind of the general advice that you start as a monolith at first, because a monolith is faster to develop. And later on, if you have the need, you start into microservices, because from the start, if you start with microservices, your development speed becomes twice or even way slower than the monolith approach. So if we get back to the question, how to choose, kind of look where it was used, and even better, try to find some friends or professionals who have experience with that and can give advice. If not that, then maybe articles or books, but try to understand the context, and also, yeah, maybe think about long term, whether, or the essence principle and principles of your project, and what kind of benefits this gives. It's maybe an abstract question, abstract answer, but if you take some time to think in this direction, you might find that, okay, I would love to try it, but yeah, this might not be the project.
Yeah, I mean, you said that you will be talking from a developer's perspective, but I think that you talked from a sane person perspective. And I think just to finish, okay, just to finish the main idea. So and the reason I'm saying this is that, yes, you said some reasonable things. So one thing, you look at the context where a particular technology was created. And I mean, that's important because some of those technologies are created as well in those contexts. So if, let's say, Facebook creates a framework in a specific organizational culture, specific business case, so they have a reason why they are doing this. And I think it's very important to understand that context. At the same time, also looking at case studies, reading about them. Now, to push back a bit, if you allow me to, I mean, I understand that experiments are expensive. That the same thing is in psychology, although I think in psychology we do more experiments than in software development. That's my feeling of reading a lot in empirical software engineering. But you can do surveys, and maybe also tell me if I'm wrong, but you can also develop a survey and try to ask people who are in the business for what specific purposes they use specific technologies, and get like a sociological understanding of what works in what context. And it seems that for some reason there is a bias towards those trendy big tech companies that are like talking in conferences and saying that this is how we did things, and for some reason there is that core belief that, okay, if we do like they did, we will be also successful. But isn't it like a cognitive mistake as well?
Yeah, but I think that kind of a good question to ask yourself. When you hear those big companies present at the conferences, okay, we have done something in a way. Usually that is a response to some kind of problem, and usually it's okay. We had a problem with scalability, and we solved it with microservices. But then, yeah, do not jump to microservices as a solution. Look whether you have a scalability problem. And yeah, if you look what kind of problem do you have, and or maybe what is inherent problem in your domain, kind of, if this is, you know that this is going to be scalable, maybe you need to think about microservices. But even that, I would maybe try to make monolith with the easy possibility to split off microservices, but not right away. And about the experiments, it's also a good thing to try the technology on a small scale, maybe on one component or small project. For example, some friends of mine at the moment are trying clean architecture, onion architecture style architecture on very small utility that they write for themselves. And it's kind of a demo project as a learning project where they will get to try that kind of architecture. And also, yeah, the risk is way smaller. You get actual experience, and everyone can learn from it. And when you try it, if you will decide to use that thing in your big project, you will do it. It will be your second project with technology.
Yeah, start small, I guess, is the idea. And we dream big. And when we dream big, it's sometimes difficult to start small.
Yeah. I also dream big. Everyone, I think most people dream big, but starting small is the way to go usually.
So basically what we are discussing right now, I still feel it ties very well to the happiness question, because there are certain factors that contribute to that essentially. And I sometimes think that it's a mistake to think that all people are more or less the same. And I think that different professional groups have their own specifics or nuances, what they enjoy about their work or life and what they don't like. And from what we discussed, I already see that there are certain aspects. And I think that they are more so. One important thing is to, yeah, I think it's the question of finishing the project. So that dignity thing that you would like to start for somewhere and end somewhere. So that's a source of satisfaction. Another thing is working with specific people. You mentioned that when you talk to certain friends that are working at company X, and you would like to work with them because maybe they are strong in what they do, they are inspiring, you might learn from them. So I think that that aspect is also important. Then toys, so to speak. So playing with new toys, learning how they work, experimenting with them. It seems that that also gives important satisfaction. And then the other thing I would like to discuss with you, and I was thinking about it yesterday. We didn't agree to talk about it, but if you don't mind, that's a spontaneous topic. I mean, my partner right now, I'm not a recruiter anymore, but she's a IT recruiter right now. And I tried to test her knowledge, so to speak, and asked her, because she's still like not very long in that field. So I said, do you understand what refactoring is? And we started talking about code refactoring. And essentially where we got into the discussion is the importance of aesthetics. And that's also, I think, a source of happiness when the system you're working on it has harmony. it's clean. Yeah, clean code, clean architecture. There are no like useless functions, useless features. The architecture is like, it looks good, you get that dopamine or whatever rush when you look at it. It's like watching at a Mona Lisa and realizing how perfect it is. So how would you philosophize about this particular need of software developers to get that aesthetics? I understand that there are very practical reasons for memory management and related, but it seems that occasionally engineers want that refactoring because it's nice to clean up that mess. What's your take on that?
Yeah, actually, I've watched a discussion about this this week about the aesthetics. That kind of aesthetics is kind of that feeling. What is when you feel it looks good, doesn't look good, but this is if you have experience, this is not that kind of just a pleasure and beauty. You can look at it more from UX perspective. Good
Yeah.
UXers, for them aesthetics is the thing that is functional. The same is for good developers. If they see that something kind of has a code smell or architecture smell, and that's a sense that you develop over time. And this sense usually tells you that, okay, this is a probable cause of problems in the future. And tidying up, usually it's way easier. For example, if you create some feature and you see that, okay, this doesn't look aesthetically pleasing, and you want to refactor it, maybe it could take a day or two to refactor some bigger feature. And after that, the feature is way easier to understand and make changes in the future. And because you just have everything in your mental space, it's kind of an easy and straightforward for you to fix it. But if you or someone else would come to that feature 4 months later and it was not refactored, and if at that time they would want to kind of make the changes or clean up, it probably could take not a day or two, but maybe a week. But also, I know that there is a dark side to that refactoring thing or aesthetic thing, where kind of maybe the OCD side, where you just want because that is right. It's when you don't take the practical considerations, but just so that everything would be right. In some cases, it might be not necessary and just a waste of time, because if kind of that feature is not stable, or maybe it's not tested, it could probably be tested, and if it's not popular, maybe even thrown out in some company. Maybe at that time to over invest in making it clean or pleasing, yeah, might be a waste of time. So it's kind of, you have to have that experienced, and it depends on personality. There are those people that kind of under refactor things, and I always say that kind of making something work as a new feature is only the first level. The second level is making
sustainable into the future.
Making it work so that it would be easy to understand for others, because to write code so that the computer would understand your code and execute what you want, it's not so hard. And even juniors with some experience can implement most of the features if they are not if they don't require some advanced algorithms or some particular knowledge. But but usually a lot of people who don't know developers well think that the main difference between junior, mid, and senior developers are the speed that they develop with. But yeah, maybe at first that's the case between the new developer and developer who has a couple of years of experience. But after some point, it's not so much about that. The developer with 10 years of experience probably will not write code 5 times faster than the developer with 2 years of experience. But what the main difference usually is that that developer will create code that will have less bugs in the future, will be easier to change, and will have less cost in the long term.
Amazing. Yeah, you touched upon important things and a lot of ideas came to my mind. So yeah, just to rephrase, if I understood you correctly. So I think, yeah, speed is important. And from a psychological perspective, I think it relates very much with the cognitive ability that declines bit by bit throughout the age. But at the same time, when you become wiser, because you have more experience, you can predict more things into the future. And the fact that you have to take into account these variables, of course, it takes more time. So it totally makes sense that a more senior person who's also maybe older in age, let's say in his 40s or something like that, he will take more time because he's thinking about these possible scenarios that might be impacted by the particular code, let's say, or line you're writing. So it totally makes sense. And I think that there are maybe situations when you are trying to push the code as fast as possible because you want that MVP. And it's great to have those, junior developers who are very fast in what they do. And maybe that's not the best product, but you have to show something to the investors, let's say, or the customers. So I think there are certain situations when it might be working. Another thing.
Don't get me wrong, senior developers can push MVP product quickly as well. Yeah, usually.
If they want.
Yeah, if they want.
Sure.
But
sure.
Usually they know when it is good to sacrifice speed for the quality.
But that's, just to be humorous a bit. I mean, still, the amount of Red Bulls or coffee a junior needs as opposed to a more senior person still differs. You have to agree on this.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing I was thinking about, about the, I'm sometimes think from a systems perspective, and I'm also interested in how different fields interrelate. And I think that there are dynamics that are similar between different fields. So for example, the question about clean code, for some reason, it resonates with the topic of climate change. And the reason I think about this is that the more clean is the system, the higher is the likelihood that it will be sustainable in the future. Similarly, like the cleaner is the environment, let's say the less plastic is in the sea or something like that, the more the environment will be sustainable in the future. So that's one resemblance I thought. And from this perspective, it totally makes sense to follow a clean code philosophy. Now, the other domain that I was thinking at the same time is, and it's totally not my field, but I'm just sometimes interested in listening to smart people talking about physics. So that's the standard model of physics that for some theoretical physicists is very, how to say, like a Frankenstein. It's put off from different theories, different perspective, but it's working. You can conduct experiments based on the standard model, and that's fine. And for some theoretical physicists, it's not aesthetically pleasing, but it works. So that's I guess the balance of, on the one hand, trying to make it sustainable, but at the same time trying to make it effective. And it also boils down to that many ideological discussions between left and right, where some are thinking about going fully electric, others are using coil because it's effective. So there are these resemblances, and they repeat from topic to topic, like the same discussions in a way. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
but sustainability is kind of sustainability pays off in the long term, and kind of if you have a prototype or MVP, maybe it's not the time to think about sustainability. And uh, there's a good example. People usually think that okay, it's a fact that paper bags are more nature friendly than plastic bags. But if you use them for a lot of times, but now what happens that, for example, if you order food in Volt or you get your delivery in paper bag, it is used once, so plastic bag would be way more sustainable. So, yeah, and those kind of things happen a lot. The same as with your shopping bag. If you don't reuse it and you are going to use it once, then take the plastic bag. Don't go for the paper bag, because the footprint of making the paper bag is it's maybe 5 or more.
But to push back a bit, it's totally not of my topic, but you would also could say that paper is more degradable.
Yes.
So that's also another argument why we might use. But what you're saying is also totally makes sense, because I mean, it's a strange thing. I'm not sure if you have this problem, but let's say if I order food from, let's say, it doesn't matter where, and I get my food in 6 paper bags. And basically I have, let's say, about 2 weeks to use them for plastic or other trash, And I had this challenge that, okay, I will not order food while I still haven't used all the paper bags. And it's actually a challenge to ensure that I use every paper bag, because there are a lot of them. And fortunately, I don't use those I don't order food online anymore. I try to make food at home because I'm working at home. It makes totally much more sense. But still, if I would, there would be even more paper bags. So I totally get what you're saying. Exactly.
And it would be a waste.
Yeah,
so
totally.
The same with the software projects. It's not about kind of sustainability or not sustainability. It's about whether it's a short-term project. And one smart developer had a story where kind of he was working in a company that they are doing following XP practices and
XP is extreme programming.
Yeah, extreme programming, okay. And it's tailored towards sustainable project growth and so on. Kind of they were producing clean code, everything covered with tests and so on.
Amazing.
From an engineering perspective, it was very nice. But their company was acquired by other company, by a bigger one in the field that didn't follow any of those practices. Had like huge number of people who were manually testing features and so on. And after a while, what happened that the new philosophy or mindset of his was that if we are doing some feature and we are not sure whether it will be feature for long term, we might not even cover it with tests, or maybe the basic tests that it works, but we will not cover everything, and we will not refactor properly and make the architecture for the long term. And when we ship it and test with a customer, then we get the feedback. And after we get the feedback, then we know whether, okay, do we want to invest in that feature? Or maybe even we want to throw that out. In some cases, they would write the code maybe quickly in a couple of days, then try it with the users. And then if they see that it is a promising, sometimes they would even don't reuse the code that they made in a couple of days or a week, or they would write from scratch the better version of that code, because they know that, okay, this is a promising feature.
Yeah, got it.
Live for a long time.
Totally makes sense. And it also boils down to I think we're talking about the dilemma between what is, I don't want to say nice, I don't want to say aesthetic, let's say theoretically pleasing. Let's say that looks good on paper from an engineering perspective, that it's good to use, that it's clean, it's nice, it's aesthetic, it's functional. And then on the other hand, what is effective, what is efficient, what does it make sense, what makes sense from a business perspective. And I think that I talked to Thomas, he's also a developer, now a manager, on the last podcast, and we talked a lot about, binary thinking. And that in these circumstances, you cannot rely on binary thinking. You have to look at the nuances, as you said, at the context. What are you actually want to do? And the fact that, okay, you're maybe not planning to, you're not sure if the feature will go into the final system, let's say, or will be used in the future. So why would you need to cover it with tests and waste so much time? So it totally makes sense to see if the customer wants to keep it in the system, let's say, and then if it's promising, then you cover it with tests and you invest more resources. So yeah, I mean, to totally makes sense. Now, if you allow me to focus also on another important aspect, you mentioned the three letters OCD, and you also translated it into the willingness to make it right. And I guess what I would like to do now is to separate maybe two concepts. So I think OCD in our lay terms and in our simple language, it does mean that tendency to be over perfectionistic and doing too much maybe sometimes. But in psychological literature, OCD it's a difficult disorder, and
there's a difference.
Yeah, and it does mean obsessive compulsive disorder, where on the one hand you get obsessive thoughts, that you keep thinking about things. So on a developer's perspective, it could be that, let's say you get back to home and you keep thinking about the mistake you did that made a system crash, and you keep thinking about it and you want to get back on your computer and maybe do something, fix it. So it can be rumination, that repetitive thinking can become a, let's say, obsessive thought. And then you get compulsion, which many times those obsessive thoughts translate into behavior, as we said, when you take the computer and try to do something about it. And it's like a very mild version of it, but when it's a disorder, it can translate into washing hands, checking if the door is closed 3 times, all these kind of things. So, but what still, nevertheless, I think that there is that, let's say, OCD personality among some developers, that willingness to do a lot, maybe repeat certain things, obsess over things, and it relates definitely with increases of burnout or risk of burnout. And there was also perfectionism and willingness to do everything right. But what is right, as we said, there's no right answer. There are appropriate answers for different situations. So I mean, what's your take? I mean, I'm always interested in software developers' personality, how you see the prominence of these, let's say, not disorder, but OCD personality traits among developers.
Yeah, that was what I had in mind, not the psychological actual OCD, because I used that OCD because we have used that term with some developers, I suppose. And even some good developers mentioned that kind of, they identified that they kind of have OCD personality, and I can relate to that myself.
Me too.
I will give an example that kind of, if I write some code and solve something in a particular manner, and that aesthetic sense that we talked about, kind of, I can write, it works, but somehow it doesn't feel right. There's that sense that, okay, this probably could be made simpler, or there are some cases that might far back in the future, then what often happens? Okay, if I cannot find a solution at the moment I'm writing it, okay, I let it go.
Wow, that
But
requires strength.
yeah, but okay, maybe not letting go. I put it away.
Yeah.
But what quite often happens, it could be when I'm in a shower, or maybe
Yeah.
next day, or on the weekend, some thoughts come back about that situation. And sometimes just the situation pops up in my head. Okay, could I solve that? And other times I get the solution. Okay, if I would make that small change, then it would everything would make sense and fall into places. Yeah, that one I can relate to. Yeah, that perfectionism is as well one of the things that I would say I have to deal with, and that is quite common among the developers, as probably among other.
Okay, thanks for sharing your situation. And I think what you described is I will psychoanalyze it a bit in psychological terms. Okay, so I think a problem in software development is when, let's say, especially maybe a junior person gets blocked into a situation, and the person is trying, let's say, 3 hours or more to solve that problem, and it can take even more hours, and it's the frustration, it's even more difficult, and then you waste a lot of time, and then you're tired and you cannot do anything, and you're disappointed about yourself that you spend, let's say, all day working on a line of code. Or I understand that I'm bastardizing the situation, but you get the idea. And then what you described, I think it's a good treatment technique for these OCD situations. So, okay, you get into a situation where it's difficult. Let's say you think that, okay, I solved it, but it's possible to make it better in the future. And what you do, you use mindfulness. You accept that, okay, it's important to me. I will not leaving it. I'm not abandoning it. I'm just postponing it. And I will accept that, okay, it will give me some discomfort, but it's fine, it's okay, it's not a big of a deal, and then you leave it. And it's in mindfulness, it's called let's say you are letting go. You're letting go for a while, and then what happens, you allow your unconscious mind to do the work when you do something else. So we sometimes forget that when we are riding a bike, we're taking a shower, we're playing computer games, our unconscious mind is working. It's processing those things. And then suddenly, from nowhere, you think a bit, and then you get an idea like the epiphany, what you can do. And then you get back and you solve it like in 30 minutes or something like that. So if that does it resemble your situation?
Yeah, it does resemble. And one of the heuristics that I use is this, if kind of I cannot find an elegant solution in some time, and if I get stuck, then okay, maybe I will just write the right working version of it. Maybe it will be ugly and so on, but I will get something working. And when I get something working, either that while I will create the working version, maybe I will get then some insights into how I make it better, because it is way easier to improve something that exists than to create something ideal from scratch. Yeah, so that one, and it is behind, actually it is behind test-driven development and refactoring, that first you create a working thing, then no, actually TDD is first you create a that is failing, then you create a working solution, and after that you tidy it up and refactor. So the same thing. But sometimes when I create that ugly solution, I have no ideas how to make it better. Then I leave it for some time. But in some cases, I try to kind of not let it go totally, because one of the things I know that, and it is very good to be conscious about, if you write something and you say, okay, I will make it better at some point in the future. Usually that happens when there's a time pressure. Usually that time when you will come back to it and fix it and make it better, usually that never comes, and people will build up on that code on top of it, and it will become harder to change. So that is something to be aware as well.
Yeah, I mean, these are two important factors. So you're, of course, if you're a genius who's working on the future best solution to climate change, let's say, and you're doing it alone in your basement, so that's one thing. But when you're working in a team where, let's say, our deadlines and customer is, waiting for you to deliver, so that's a totally different situation, and time pressure and interrelatedness between what you do and others do, of course, these have to be accounted. And it's definitely a problem where you get bogged down into a situation, but then you have that time pressure. And for some people, it's too overwhelming and they don't deal with that stress, and they eventually burn out. And yeah, then they have to do something about it. But still, Algimantas, you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The good thing you mentioned the team, because actually when I get stuck, often if I have the opportunity, I will consult one of my team members to present the problem, to look at the solution together, and sometimes it proves very helpful.
And I will challenge you here a bit, but you think that, okay, how can I go to that person? I don't want to disturb him. Oh, but if I disturb him, maybe he will or she think that I'm not smart, so I have to do it myself. It's not good to ask a person for help. I have to do it on my own. That's important to me. You know where I'm getting at? So it's great that it's great that you are wise and you understand that just because you go and get a sparring session with a colleague and a discussion, but for some people, especially junior developers, to ask for help it's psychologically very difficult, and that's a problem. So I guess what I would like to hear, how if it was a problem or is in your situation sometimes, and if it was or is, how you manage to overcome this psychological barrier or this negative belief that if you are asking for help, you are in a way stupid somehow.
Okay, there are two components to this one. The first one is kind of situations that involve shame. Those are situations where kind of I feel that I should be good at this, but I'm not. For example, let's say some new technology or some I was away from software development for some time, and in that period, Docker containers, Amazon Web Services, and other things kind of improved a lot. And there is a gap that I have to catch up, and that was one area where it was a big difficult for me to ask for help, and I was very conscious about that. That kind of, even though I'm quite good developer, but I have to admit that, okay, I don't know some basic things about this infrastructure, and I need to ask maybe other developers who have way less experience about this thing. So yeah, kind of it involves that ego thing. But yeah, I would do it. I would ask for help anyway, because I know that it will save time.
Once again, efficiency and
Yeah, yeah.
business case. Yeah.
And for other things, it is some cases are quite easy because I look at them as a kind of as a code reviews, because
Mm.
developers, that's a common practice. Most developers do code reviews. So why should I kind of wait until the whole solution is finished and then I show my code and other developers review it? I think at it as, okay, I have a partially working solution, and I will go and speak with developers and show them my code or my ideas, architecture, and I will get the feedback faster. And
Yeah.
this, when I look at it like that, then it doesn't feel so much, doesn't involve like my self-esteem.
Mm. Interesting. I mean, yeah, once again, many thoughts. Yeah, when I talk to Algimantas, I get this bombardment of different streams of ideas where we can get, but just to focus on a bit on what you described. Mm, if you allow me, once again, you to psychoanalyze certain sentences that you used. You said, "I should know this," and that's an interesting sentence. I should. And a question is maybe it's a rhetorical one. You don't have to answer it right now, but I mean, why should you know it? Because in a way, you were focusing on different things when you were not developing. You were an agile coach and you were helping the team or other teams in different respects. And from a self-compassion perspective, it's totally normal and natural that because you focused on different things, you didn't have time or resources to focus on that. Therefore, it's totally natural to ask for the help, because by doing that, you're being more professional than wasting a lot of company resources while trying to do something totally independently. So in this particular aspect, I think that sentence, "I should," if someone stops a bit and, okay, why I should? There is potential for some self-compassion and, okay, acceptance that, okay, it's fine on the one hand. The other thing you mentioned that yeah, that the other aspect where you, let's say, have something, maybe a semi-functional solution, and I think it's also a good idea, because you don't have to have it perfect to ask a question. I mean, and the other person usually, from if a person is not a psychopath and the teammate, usually he or she will be totally fine to help and help you out, especially if he realizes that you had maybe a gap and that you need time to get back on track in a way. So I think if teammates are compassionate as well, understanding that also works. But I guess the problem is that many times some are not compassionate and they think that, why are you coming to me, because you have to know this. And sometimes the problem comes not from not from within, but from outside, from lack of understanding, lack of compassion. So yeah, I just wanted to, maybe clarify the record, that maybe use my psychological hat to show that it's okay not to know things when there are reasons for that, I guess.
Yeah, that from the logical side, it makes sense. What happens that at first, the feeling probably, and the thought and the feeling following it comes really fast.
Exactly.
And if you think about it and rationalize, sometimes that does the help. Yeah.
Okay.
But what I also noticed that it's a thing about a spotlight. If you put the spotlight or the attention on yourself, that I should know, if I don't know, then maybe I'm not as good a developer, so on, then it gets entangled with with feelings and psychological processes way more. If you put on the code, okay, I have some kind of code, some kind of solution, and now let's look at this. Can you help me make it better? We now are talking about something external that maybe I have on my screen instead of talking about me as a person. And also, yeah, that's a good point. I noticed that this works with developers as well in other situations. For example, let's say stand-ups, and people in the stand-ups, they have to talk what they did, what they are working on, or what kind of problems they're facing or blockers. And there's that kind of way. But a couple of years I've been with the teams, we've been doing different kind of stand-ups where kind of we show what we did, like a print screen or video. And when you don't focus, even those developers that don't like to talk, when they have a screenshot or some short video of the feature that they did in the last day, then for them it becomes easier to describe what they did, answer questions, and so on, because the attention now is not on them as the person. And during the COVID pandemic, and when most of people worked from home, at least developers, a lot of developers are not very fond of turning the cameras on during calls. And I think it's also about that kind of, when you are on the screen, the tension, and you are aware about that you are a little bit on stage at the time. But if kind of, instead of you speaking to others and talking about, okay, I did feature A and I got stuck in this place, maybe I need some help, and now you feel on the stage. If instead on the screen is some screenshot and you are talking about that, you don't feel like you are on the stage. It's like your product is on the stage.
Totally. And once again, many different thoughts. So in a way, what we are describing, and you are included especially, are certain processes that were discovered by psychotherapists that if they are worked through, people experience less suffering in life in general. If there are certain processes that were discovered by psychotherapists that if people in therapy or with themselves, they work them out, they talk about them, discuss them, there's less suffering about situations, work, the relationships, or whatever. So one of those processes is that self, or let's say ego, is not fixed, it's fluid. So for example, what we discussed about that you should know something. I mean, sure, if you rationalize that, okay, I was a developer since some time, but of course, then I was an agile coach and then I was developer. If you take that agile coach long career out, it may seem that, okay, I should have this continuity. But the thing is that people change, and they can change, and there doesn't have to be that continuity. You have, at some point, you can be a developer, at the other, you can create honey and raise bees or whatever, and it's okay. But for some reason, we want to make sure that there is that continuity. I had this the same. I look at my LinkedIn profile and I try to make sure that from one role, it naturally flows to the other and that it looks good, you know, that aesthetic thing. But in a way, self is not fixed. And when people in therapy realize that self is not fixed, it reduces some tension. Of course, when they actually realize it. And another thing that you mentioned also, it's a process that can be worked on, is that you are not your thoughts. And in a way, when you, during stand-up, when you talk, let's say what you did as a person, it seems that people become entangled with the code. They identify themselves with the product they create. But in a way, when you're talking about it, not from your perspective, but from what you did, from the actual outcome, and you look, how to say, as you said, you show a screenshot or you share your screen, there is more distance between what you did and what you are. Therefore, there's less tension.
Yes.
So these are, it's like the second process. And there are much more processes in cognitive behavioral therapy that if they are worked out, people, they feel less suffering in a way. And these, I mean, we all have these processes, and it's impossible to reduce them entirely, but when you are aware of them, it's a bit easier to go for life. So I'm glad to hear that you're not a psychologist, but I still see you in a way as a psychologically minded person, because you worked a lot with people, you worked a lot with yourself. And I'm always glad when people, they are talking from their experience, from their subjective experience, their objective experience, certain things come out that are backed up by theory. I think that's the most beautiful thing that I can witness sometimes.
Yeah, that happens often. Even I spoke with a friend of mine yesterday. We shortly met accidentally in the city, and we spoke about that thing where at work we noticed that some developers who have been like developing for 10 years or something around that time, they start reading a particular kind of books, and what they find in those books, that someone has already been through their experience and systemized the things, and that their experience has a name, and patterns they encountered in experience, they are kind of unknown patterns with names.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, I'm not sure how about you, but I think, at least in my counseling practice, what clients appreciate when they find those names or theories on or processes, because in a way it allows you to create that distance. Because when you're entangled with your feelings, with your thoughts, it seems that it's you. But when there is a name, it somehow becomes like an object that you can study. And suddenly you get that distance that, okay, that's depressive thought, and I'm not my depressive thought, therefore I'm not maybe that miserable. So that distance, I mean, it's oftentimes very important. And another thing that people are suggested to do is write things out. And I think it's a similar process when you show your code on a screen. You write out your thoughts, whatever that comes to your mind, and then you realize that, okay, this is here, that's not here, so that's not me. And it can be also therapeutic. So oftentimes suggest my clients to have a journal where they just hash out everything that is making them feel bad. Also, what makes them feel good, which has to be also taken into account, what you are proud of, what you did well, what are you satisfied about, to make sure that it's also in your working memory. So
I see two kinds of components. One is that you externalize, you distance yourself from, let's say, those thoughts. But the other thing is sense making. That if you just have particular thoughts, maybe they are kind of disturbing and so on, and it might be confusing for one thing, and maybe it could seem unpredictable and so on. But when you have a name and you have a known process, then the world becomes, at least that part of your world becomes predictable, understandable, and less confusing. So this creates safety as well.
Totally. Look, another thing, and you mentioned it, that, and we referred to this during our conversation, your rodeo into agile coaching, so to speak, a long rodeo, right? And I uh, I think it's important to note as well that I learned about agile from you when we were roommates, so I still appreciate that very much. It gave me inspiration to do my psychological research on agile software development teams, and I always saw agile philosophy, I think, more than just work organization philosophy or how to organize things, how to write software code. I always saw it as a mindset as well. We talked a lot about it, a philosophy, actual philosophy that has certain principles, certain ideas that should be taken into account. And I think that some of those ideas, directly or indirectly, I don't remember the manifesto, but I'm sure that they resemble what we discussed. So one way is to think about the what's important to the customer as opposed to what it's right in a way, or maybe thinking about what is efficient, what allows you to create maybe a working version. And I think these principles, they translate into psychological agility as well, or emotional agility. I think that what we discussed, what software developers do in teams, I think it can be done personally with your own mind, where, for example, you think that, okay, so I want to achieve something in my life, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a small version of it. And it's much more important to, okay, I want to be a psychologist, so maybe I will become a coach first, see if I like talking to people intensively on one-on-one situations. And if I do, then I decide to study not 1 week or half a year, I will study for 4 years. So I think that these principles are very, how to say, applicable in very practical psychological terms. At the same time, I sometimes feel that there is a lot of bias towards teams and less towards individual. Although, you know, one of the principles says that individuals and teams over processes, right? But then it seems that the individual is lost somewhere in the discussions about psychological safety, team engagement. Whereas, okay, so what about the individual? What has the person have to be aware of, understand about oneself to be a good team member in a way? So would you be interested maybe to explore this particular water of maybe business agile, but also emotional agility? Would it be an interesting topic to you?
Emotional agility. Okay. I'm not particularly qualified or know much about emotional agility and what kind of thing that is. Maybe you can give me more context, what you have in mind.
Sure. I mean, maybe just to start with on the problem level. So the question would be like this. Would you agree with this rash statement that there is maybe too much focus on how teams interact as opposed to how the individual or the individual psyche, individual processes interact? And you know, maybe I'm biased, but I would like to see more balance. I would like to see more focus. And when it comes to discussions about agile methodologies, about working on yourself as an individual first. You know, for example, in psychotherapy, to become a psychotherapist, you have to collect a certain number of hours where you get your own personal therapy. In coaching, it's like you have to become an accredited coach, you have to also get mentor coaching. But at the same time, in agile coaching, I would love to see more focus, okay, on what a developer or a agile team member in general should do first to work on oneself to be a successful teammate. So I guess that's the first problem I'm interested in.
Okay, yeah. I haven't seen or I can't remember much about this. That this would be an area that would be I would say popular in agile circles. there are people who kind of talk about it, but not too many, not too much.
Why do you think is that the case? If you had to psychoanalyze, let's say, why is that the case?
Psychoanalyze. Okay, maybe that might be difficult for me, but I will give my theories. One is that Agile became popular, at least in Europe, mainly through Scrum. And Scrum is kind of popular with managers, and it's usually sold not to developers but to managers, some developers as well. But for me it's not the biggest kind of I'm not the biggest fan of Scrum because it gets misapplied so much. People focus a lot on the processes, like we do sprint planning, we do daily stand-ups or daily scrums, we do retrospectives, we have a backlog, and then it means that we do Scrum, and they don't focus so much on individuals and interactions, that team members are empowered and that they make decisions and work through themselves. One of the good things where I think that idea of how the individual should work on himself and how should work in a team, I have encountered that in what's called core protocols. It's not, it predates kind of Agile movement by a bit, or in a similar time scale. It's kind of, it was not a part of the initial Agile movement. But those protocols, they are written in very technical language, but their main focus is on the teamwork, but on the teamwork from a participant, from an individual perspective. Like, okay, for example, if I want to be successful at making my ideas or making decisions, then how do I propose the decision so that it would be made? And also, it requires some part on the team that kind of you want to have some agreements inside the team that would kind of would empower you as an individual to easily propose ideas and make decisions.
Yeah.
The same way, for example, they have a checkout protocol, let's say, and it's very simple action is, if you feel that you are overwhelmed, or you don't feel like talking with anyone, or you feel like you are getting angry and you don't want to kind of make something you will regret with your team members, you say, I check out, and you make distance from yourself and the team. For example, if you are in a meeting, you just leave the meeting. Yeah, but it's kind of self-care activity.
Yeah.
And the agreement with the team is that people will not chase you, will not try to stop you. They respect your decision that now you kind of need a timeout. And after you do this a few times, it doesn't happen often. It's kind of a last resort, but it's good to have in a team. And then when you calm down, maybe you come back in a team. When you are calmed down, it's way easier to resolve things when you are in an angry state. More things like that in those protocols.
In core protocols.
Yeah, in core protocols. They're not too easy to find on the web, but that's such a thing. People who want, they can find them.
Maybe that's also telling about the problem
Yeah, that's also telling. When I encountered them, for me it made sense that those protocols, even though they are written in kind of uh, mm, language that people might reject,
I guess they
but
are old a bit if they
yeah, they
predated
are.
Agile.
Yeah, they are kind of old, but the ideas and psychological principles behind them actually are very sound. They work. I have tested it myself uh, as an agile coach, but also as
Yeah,
a
we
coach.
left a room as well once.
Yeah, I have done that. I have done that.
How others reacted.
Um, it was okay. It was no fuss.
World didn't end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't, and uh, kind of you don't you can let's say you don't need to use that in that particular way, but it's just good thing if you notice that okay, I cannot participate well in this meeting.
Hmm.
Maybe I say that okay guys, I need some break to calm down,
Hmm.
or you can say I need some maybe just to take break, to take a smoke or to go to the bathroom, or and you ask maybe so for all meeting to have a short break, or sometimes you just say that okay, I need to take a break. But it's the same idea.
Yeah, I mean, and the another important idea, it seems, related to these core protocols, I will definitely look into them, is the idea of personal responsibility.
Yes.
That if you have to if you want to propose an idea, make sure that, let's say, you have proper presenting or negotiation skills to do that. So that's already very informative. If, let's say, it's emotionally overwhelming, so make sure to take care for your own emotions without maybe, and that's maybe that's the old aspect. I mean, where at that time maybe there was less psychological safety in meetings, and I think a current protocol would be to share your feelings, what is overwhelming, and talk them
um,
through
they
in a
have
way.
a protocol for that. We call it check-in.
Okay, awesome. But what I guess where I'm getting at is that it starts from the person, right? And I think that's
Yes,
equally
that's key difference
exactly.
from all the other things which I encounter. That was the one that focused on individual the most. And at first, for me, it took me a few years to grasp that that's the main difference, and that it doesn't focus so much that kind of okay, we agree as a team that we are going to work that in this
Yeah,
way. The agreement is kind of that um, we will have some kind of agreements that empower each individual to act and take the best care and to be most productive as an individual.
totally. And it's what I wanted to say. I think that it's equally important to be able to be a good team member or a good team, but also a good person. And teams are, they are people, individual contributors constitute teams. And it's sometimes interesting whereas that bias from a team perspective as opposed to individual perspective. I guess the reason why I'm also interested in that is the psychology of it. Why is it the case that for some reason in software development it's easier to talk about teams, it's easier to talk about team processes, but it seems that it's much more difficult to talk about like what comes from the individual. I guess it once again boils down to the maybe some introversion, maybe some lack of emotional intelligence. And I think that it's changing right now, at least in Lithuanian software development community, where, let's say, developers are more exposed to company funded counseling activities. I think that more and more agile coaches are starting to realize that uh, they are not they are trainers, but they are also coaches in the modern sense of the word, where you have to be able to be able to talk about difficult feelings and reflect on them and help the person go through various processes and find a solution. So it seems that it becomes also important, but still, it's still as a perfectionist, I would like to see maybe more balance between those two domains. What do you think?
Could you shorten the question?
That's not a question. That's just, my usual way of ranting and just saying, what do you think?
Okay, this is kind of, I was listening, but
where's the question? So is he doing his
question?
now you're triggering my skin that I'm my core belief that I should be better interviewer, but I realize
No,
that
you're fine. You're totally fine.
okay, but if it's talking seriously, yeah, I mean, the question is, I guess, what should or can the Agile community do on a practical level to be more confident and more courageous to talk about those elephants in the room, to talk about feelings, to talk about sadness, to talk about frustration, to talk about guilt, also to share joy, to express gratitude, to forgive, all these kind of emotional things that constitute what it's like to be a safe team, I guess. So it's not only that you can share your opinion, it's also about sharing some of your private thoughts. And I still feel that it's for some reason it seems that engineers find it much easier just to focus on their code and do less people stuff because it's too draining. And I think it's draining because there is that insecurity about what to do when you talk about feelings. So yeah, so the question is, what can Agile community do to rebalance this and provide more emotional safety as well, not only from a cognitive level, let's say?
Okay. That's a difficult question, kind of what a community as a community can do, because it's kind of communities in the sky who are going to make action.
I want to be fair to the Agile community as well. I don't want that them to think that I think they are not working with psychological safety. I think that any professional Agile coach right now realizes that it's important, that you have to account for it when you're working with a team, and you have to be versed yourself how to account and ensure that psychological safety in a team. So that's like just to make it clear, But I guess I'm getting into details now, and where I'm getting at, where I'm coming from is my experience of a counselor, because I realized recently that 80% of my clients work in IT. I always wanted it to be that way, but just recently noticed that that's the key right now. And I started thinking about individual cases where I talked to engineers, and I realized that, okay, I'm aware of the companies that they work in, and I realized that there is definitely psychological safety, like according in the Google sense, let's say, but maybe there's not necessarily emotional safety or ability to show vulnerability, emotional vulnerability. And I think it's important to maybe sometimes differentiate between the two, because one thing is to have a constructive environment where all of the teammates can share ideas and get constructive feedback. I think that it based on the idea of absence of bad communication. Sometimes it seems that this is psychological safety. Understand that it's more nuanced. I think that safety also entails the ability, as we said, to talk about your emotional states. And I think that the reason why and maybe it's totally not on the agile coaches, maybe it's more on the individuals who maybe do not have the vocabulary or reasons why they should talk about their feelings. And an important example we discussed was, so when you have to leave the meeting. So by explicitly saying what is going on, you create safety, because people are more understanding when they realize that, okay, guys, it triggered something in me and I want to ruin the meeting, so I will go and I will just I will spend my time a bit alone in the blah blah blah, just to uh, for others understand. And when you're just leaving, it can seem strange. Okay, what is going on? Should we do something or not? And that's that uncertainty. So I think that when there is space to talk about your emotional feelings, let's say, okay, you're having a discussion and someone is very pushy about, let's say, product owners, very pushy about putting a certain feature on the backlog, and everyone is like silent, but everyone, it's clear that people are not satisfied, but they don't want to be aggressive, and they are just, being polite in a way. But in this particular situation, a good way would be, okay, look, the way you are suggesting this feature, it seems a bit aggressive. I feel unsafe about it. It triggers me. It triggers something in me, and I'm not sure what's the dynamic, but let's talk about it. And I guess, it addresses the elephant in the room. And maybe we realize that when this feedback is given to the product owner says, oh, sorry, guys, in the morning, I had a conflict with my child. He didn't want to brush teeth. So I guess that's the thing. I'm trying to achieve at least something in the morning. So I'm trying to push this thing. So sorry, guys, that was a bit too much. And then everyone is fine because they realize what is going on, and then they can talk constructively. So this is where I'm referring at. And maybe that's the case in various organizations, but from the conversations I get, it seems that there is still potential for more safety, let's say. So I guess the question would be, first of all, do you agree if it's reasonable? Maybe there should be less emotions in these discussions. And the other thing is, what would be a solution if you do think that there should be more emotional safety? What can we do about it?
Yeah, the case you have described would be ideal. It doesn't happen often. What I see happening more often, it's not that kind of the scenario you talked about. It's very reasonable, mature. What usually happens is kind of pushback with a humor. Kind of, are you really going to push this if kind of no one supports this idea? If you present it in a light tone and with a light touch, not kind of, at least that's what I do.
Okay.
Because if I will start in a serious tone, that kind of, you are now talking a bit aggressively or pushing your idea aggressively, this creates awkwardness. It just happens. I'm not judging whether it's right, but kind of in most situations, this creates awkwardness. And if you communicate the idea, but with a light touch of humor, somehow it's easier for the person to accept it more, and it doesn't put the person maybe so much spotlight on the aggressivity part, but the person, if he's conscious of that kind of, he understands this. Okay, yeah, I get the feedback that, okay, I'm being a bit pushy, and okay, yeah, that's reason probably I'm being a bit pushy. And yeah, the good managers I worked with, they are sensible to the reactions from the team, kind of from the comments, or if everyone gets silent, then a good manager say, okay, we'll start kind of asking questions or start wondering what's happening on, guys. Do you agree? How does this sound? That that case that you described, where manager says, okay, in the morning I had some maybe conflict with my kid, or I was not productive, and I want to get something done in the morning. Was kind of, that was the ideal that I wanted to see in the teams I was coaching, but didn't happen very often. I noticed that the more reasonable cases, light-hearted feedback, and with a touch of humor maybe, and that maybe it's the in-between state. I also noticed that good managers, yeah, they do make themselves vulnerable and kind of say that, okay, yeah, maybe I had a rough morning and too much meetings, guys. Sorry, maybe I was inconsiderate and so on. So
wow, amazing. Yeah, I guess two things. So one thing, I think there is some, when you put two Venn diagrams, they interact and you get that sweet spot. So I think that this sweet spot is, on the one hand, for both sides to be able to share feelings, but do that in a humorous, lighthearted way. And when I counsel people, that's actually sometimes what I do. When I challenge them, for example, I notice a certain dynamic between us. And I realize that, for example, a client is getting into the mode where he or she is trying to prove something to me. So because especially if we have this context and that happened in the past, so I smile and I say, so you're in the pushy mode now, right? And it reduces the tension a bit because it acknowledges the elephant in the room. And at the same time, it creates that self-awareness moment. So I think it's definitely important. And I guess also to push back also a bit, I don't want to sound bad, but because you are a friend of mine, I will be open to, although this will be listened by other people's as well. Yeah, humor is very important. And I think it's as Freud said, it's like the most efficient coping mechanism against anxiety. And I'm not against humor, but when there is too much humor, especially sarcasm and irony, in my view, I'm feeling horrible of saying that, but to me, it seems childish a bit. It seems that we're in kindergarten where are not adults talking, but children. And they are afraid to take responsibility for their feelings. So a more safer way is to joke around, ha ha ha, how funny, and just solve the problem this way. I'm not sure if it's all around the world the same, but in Lithuania, I noticed that there is some lack of mature communication. I understand that, yeah, that the way I presented the example, it's also not the best example, but also, that
have to be.
But sorry?
It doesn't have to be the best.
Yeah, it should be effective and it should work. And now the question is, when you're not expressing your feelings and reasons why you're not appreciative or aggressive tone, are you actually taking responsibility for your feedback? And I would argue that not necessarily, because when we explain why we don't like something and provide sometimes subjective reasons, I think then we take responsibility. But when we are just saying that, oh, it's not me, it's you who are aggressive, but maybe the problem with me is that I'm a hypersensitive person and I don't feel safe when someone is pushy. And it's important to take responsibility for this personal trait and say, look, dude, I mean, I'm sure that no one would say that, but, I'm a sensitive guy. So you don't want to start, crying right now because you are rehashing something from your childhood, So, I mean, I understand that no one would say that, but the idea, the gist of it is that you try to communicate the sincere reason and trying to make sure that the person understands what he is doing and what impact does it have. And I think that balance of showing that you don't appreciate something, but at the same time showing why you don't appreciate that it's somehow related to you as well. I think that's the key, but I'm still struggling to understand. And I think you encountered this as well, how to help individuals be more open-minded about being vulnerable. And that's what I can do in my counseling sessions if that's a problem. But if you are an agile coach, it's to get into a heart of a developer. Of course, I guess it can be difficult.
Yeah, I looked at it from an individual perspective. An individual on the team, you kind of should look at the team, what kind of team you are in, and what kind of mood or the state the team is now, or the discussion is in now. And those discussions that, or teams that you mentioned, where there is a lot of sarcasm, then it might be difficult to switch to an honest mode. And sometimes if the team is really not safe or judgmental, and that kind of there's a reason why people are not honest about their feelings. One of the reasons that they can get hurt. Kind of, you can
Exactly.
say honestly that,
Yeah.
guys, I feel like I presented a good idea, and I'm feeling like my idea, and I am being rejected by the whole team, and it's really painful. But you know that if you are going to say this, you can get more rejection.
Yeah, because exactly. And to jump in a bit, some clients that have these problems, let's say, including in their personal lives, that's also another thing where, for example, a partner is sensitive, maybe is crying. And what I noticed, I'm not sure if it's a pattern, but several people told me they don't know what to do about it. So they just sit silent, and they realize that, okay, something is going on. I don't know what to do about it. What should I do about it? And then you freeze and you don't do anything. I heard a story. There is a tech kinship. I'm not sure if you heard of that initiative, but it's created by Alona, and they had like a discussion about feelings in the workplace. And one of the participants told a story where when he had a meeting with a employee, a one-on-one, I guess, and the employee started crying, he just left the room. So that's another thing what you can do. You just can leave. So you can freeze or you can leave. I think the second one is even worse. So I guess what I'm getting at is that, yeah, totally. And that's why I guess I'm biased about working with individuals, because if, let's say, all of the team members would have a proper understanding what it's like to understand your emotions and express your emotions, and they would realize that it's okay, and they would have permission to do that, let's say by the team manager or product owner or whatever, I think it might work. I still haven't seen it like with my eyes, but
it does work. It depends on the team, and it it needs some individuals to take the courage to do it first. Actually, at the last team I worked, there was a moment when I talked about the pressure I feel when during our daily calls, one of the managers would keep asking whether are you going to finish this till a certain date. And when that question got asked quite frequently, that created anxiety on my side. And especially when, in some cases when that question was asked and I had to answer that question on the spot, I understand that it takes time to answer the question, how long do you think this feature will take? If it's a bigger feature and complex and so on, and things change over time. And I expressed that thing during our retrospective, and the team was supportive, and there was another person who shared the same feelings and
Yeah.
supported that. Okay, yeah, I'm feeling this similar, and others said, yeah, that's maybe that feels a bit too pushy. And after that, kind of the culture around that has changed. And if something similar to that happened, then the team, somebody from the team would point out. I still want to add about that thing, psychological safety and stuff like that. We talked about that agile coaches should improve, and also other psychological things. The trend that I've seen in IT and what people can do is that they choose better companies. If they work on a team that is not safe, people don't respect each other, or managers don't respect developers or other staff, they go to a better place to work. And the difference, and I've been working in the IT field for 20 years, so the difference I've seen how IT field changed and the culture in the IT companies, it has changed a lot for the better, and it's way more respectful, the culture, and psychological safety is way harder than it used to be. And all of this is because developers are in high demand, and if the developers work in a company that they suffer, at some point they leave and they look for a better company. And this is a good thing that happens, kind of evolution and selection, even without agile coaches. And I think IT is good fields to work in, where people are quite well respected.
Yeah. And to add on that, I agree. I also noticed this trend, but I would also agree that just because I'm not saying that you are saying this, but just to add on, just because the developers are in high demand doesn't mean that there shouldn't be psychological safety.
No.
Any individual has the right to constructive, safe, emotionally, psychologically safe communication and environment. And if a company is trying to adopt psychological safety ideas just because they, let's say, think that, okay, it's attractive, that's a problem in itself, and it will be visible in the communication, the artificiality of meetings or whatever. So just a small cherry on what you discussed, I think, is important. And as a final note, unfortunately, we didn't have time to talk about your own career. I mean, to me, it's very interesting, and maybe we'll have next time. But for the ending, you mentioned 20 years of experience in IT field. That's definitely a lot. I mean, I see you as a wolf in the best sense of the word, as a engineer, as a agile coach. And what would be your, let's say, 3 lessons, what you learned as a agile coach and software developer throughout those 20 years? And if you had to summarize them briefly, 3 lessons, just to end this, what would they be?
Okay, that's a big question. But the first thing that comes to my mind is that I have to take care of myself, kind of that that is a personal responsibility. For example, if that is my responsibility to make sure I will not burn out. That is my responsibility. If kind of I'm not enjoying my work, then I have to do something about it. Maybe I have to either change projects, either change my attitude, maybe speak to my manager, maybe I need to change the company even, but kind of this is for me to do. If I'm not happy with my relationship with some colleague, it's not going to change if I will not take some steps. So it is for me to kind of be proactive and try to get what I want. And if I do that, it might I might get what I want. I notice that it happens more often than I would expect. Not always. And that sometimes it gets good results for the environment, for the team I work with and the company. That's one of the big things. Another thing for me is kind of looking through the health perspective, long-term health perspective, team and the project. Code base, whether the code base is being covered with tests, whether it's going to become a legacy project or not. And the same with the team. I noticed that when I have more experience, I tend to favor the solutions and things that I look at the higher time scale and also the higher level of abstraction. And the third one is looking through the user's or perspective.
Okay.
I choose the solution. I want to look how the user is going to use it, whether it is good for my company that I use it. And yeah, and that kind of through those things, not to forget to enjoy the process.
Yeah, really great. I mean, like three perspectives to look at from your own perspective, to look from company's perspective, to look from user's perspective, and enjoy the process as much as possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that was a wonderful time. It was a wonderful time as usual. It's just like the first time we allowed others to witness it. So I really enjoy these conversations as much as ours. I think that we touched on many important topics, and it would be lovely to have you here once again in the future.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot as well. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Algimantas. Bye-bye.
Bye.